Huntington's disease. It's nothing to screw with. I should know. Why? Because my father has it. Basically, it's a mix of all the neurological diseases. ALS, MS, and dementia are just 3 of them. So after a while, my dad won't be able to walk, talk, eat on his own, or make his own decisions. My father's only 57 years old. In a video I posted a few months ago, I said I wanted you guys to know the real Selena Resnick, not just the performer, but the person. No, I would never be able to video my daily life, but I can at least explain some of it to you. I didn't know much about the illness when I was younger, other than the fact that my dad was always tripping or getting hurt at work. I just thought it was him. There are some things you don't know about me. One of them is that my parents are divorced. Not because of money or anything like that, but because my dad didn't tell my mom about the disease. Not until she was getting ready to have me. She thinks that because of the stress after finding out about the illness in his family caused me to be born premature. But the truth is, even if it hadn't been for the Huntington's disease, I still could have been born early. This disease is hereditary, so everyone is worried that I'll get it in the future. But here's the thing. I'm not worried. Not yet. I still have my life to live. My life as a visually impaired individual. My mom and her family get angry at my father, but in reality, what's that going to do at this point, besides make things worse? They could get angry and make comments all they want, but it won't make things better, right? Another thing you don't know is that just before I started this channel, my dad had a heart attack, May 18th, 2018. And that's what started the worst summer of my life. I didn't know it at the time, but Huntington's disease causes anxiety. So, that was what was happening. He wasn't crazy, he was sick. Almost every day there was another argument or a trip to the hospital because he always thought something was wrong when there was absolutely nothing wrong. Or when there was something wrong, it was really small. By that time, I had already discovered the cranberries, and I mainly stayed away from everyone, just listening to Dolores' voice. I didn't want to even be near them. My parents, I mean. They weren't mean to me directly. It was the arguments they constantly had because of my father's anxiety. He was so scared that it was driving my mom crazy. They'd get into arguments every day. Even my birthday was no exception. They argued that morning, not a screaming match like some of the other ones, but just enough to ruin the day. I got to meet my best friend for lunch, but as for the rest of my birthday, it just went on like any other day that summer. Just me in my room listening to Dolores. Just me avoiding my family. My birthday is July 28th. The voice surgery was on July 11th, 2018. In the weeks leading up to the surgery, I was a nervous wreck. Not because of my voice, but because I didn't know how stressed I would be during that time. I just knew there was going to be some kind of trouble. Sure enough, I was right. There was yet another argument the day after the surgery. I started clapping to get my parents into the room. They both came in and I took out the iPad and I wrote on a drawing app, "I've had enough." Before the voice surgery, I had spoken to my friend, we'll call her Sporty Spice, the same friend that I had seen on my birthday a few weeks later. She didn't know anything that was going on that summer, at least not at the time. Neither did any of my other friends or family. I guess I just didn't want to talk about it. My whole life, my friends have been a distraction, so I never wanted to talk about the problems I was having with them. I stayed on the phone with anyone, even friends that I never usually called. They didn't know why. Not until now. On August 3rd, 2018, my father had gone to the hospital with chest pains. He thought it was another heart attack. The doctor said his enzymes were low and that they'd just keep an eye on him for a few days. That was a Friday. That Saturday, when we went to visit my dad, they had a psychologist there to talk to him. He said he didn't want me to have to hear him saying he didn't want to be around anymore. That's true. He had said that. I found out that even while I was in surgery, he said that to my mom in the waiting room. Now, before I tell you the rest of this story, just keep this part in mind. They had a psychologist there to talk to my father. They knew there was something wrong in his mind. The doctors knew. That night, I was watching TV and I heard the name Lori. I didn't know why at the time, but for some reason, Lori Berkner's name came to my mind. I decided to look her name up on YouTube and found some of the videos I used to watch when I was younger. Buzz Buzz, Victor Vito. I could see them so clearly, but more importantly, I was being transported back to another time, a better time than the one I was currently living in. And judging by what happened the next week, I now know why I needed to hear Lori's music again. I needed to go back to that time. I learned Buzz Buzz on guitar after only a day. The next day, August 5th, we went to the hospital to pick up my dad, and what did we find? The doctor requesting that I come into the room alone. My mom recently told me that my dad had a crazy look in his eyes, like his eyes were bugging out of his head that day. When I went in, my dad said that he was telling the doctor that my mother was abusive. Something that was not true. My mom had gotten angry with him several times, but there was never any abuse. I'd spoken with my father and the doctor trying to explain the situation, but was crying so much that it was just no use. That probably didn't help matters, considering the fact that the doctor said, "Oh, well then I might need to make a call," which, by the way, she never did, thank God. And what happened next? I have to say, some of the blame I put on the doctors because they had a psychologist in there to talk to him. They knew there was something wrong. And then this happened. A woman took me out of the room so my mom and dad could talk. The woman tried to distract me, I guess, by talking about my favorite singer, Selena, who was on the shirt that I was wearing that day. And she gave me a cookie. All I remember is being really scared and not being able to see straight anymore. I hadn't told my family this that day because, to be honest, I was afraid. I knew it was my anxiety that was causing me to just be completely out of it, but I didn't want to end up in my own hospital room. When we got home, my mom said she was taking me to stay at my grandparents' house with her. Then she gave me a choice. I could either stay with her or stay with him. So it was either I felt bad for not going with her or I could feel bad for leaving my dad alone. Honestly, I didn't want to go with either one of them. I wanted out of this situation completely. There were several times that summer when I could have just walked out the door. I could have left and never looked back, but where where would I go? Who would I go with? I went to my grandparents, but only because I liked going to their house. I brought my guitar to practice Buzz Buzz and some other songs, along with a bunch of Selena CDs and DVDs, and the Cranberries' Greatest Hits CD that got me through that whole summer. The next day, my father kept calling me. Whenever he called, I'd answer, and all he would say was, "Love you." At one point, he asked what I was doing that day. I planned to record Buzz Buzz and upload it to YouTube. I could tell by his voice he'd been crying and that he hadn't slept much the night before. My grandparents left for something, and he called again. I told him not to do anything weird, something I told him frequently during those 2 months. He said he already did, told me he loved me, and hung up. I told my mom and she called him. Then she called 911. I won't go into too much detail of how this happened for your sake, but basically he tried to take his own life. We rushed home, he was taken in an ambulance, and I was looking for Dolores. My mom had brought my DVDs back home, but the CDs were still at my grandparents'. I just remember crying and asking where Dolores was. The whole week he was Baker acting, Laurie Berkner, the Cranberries, and Selena were all I listened to. They found out that my dad was sleep deprived. Once he got the right medication, he was okay for a while, up until late 2019. We had moved to a different house by this point. During the move, I was scared since we'd been in the same house for 16 years. Every time we did something with the new house, I listened to Sean Coleman's song, "Sonny Came Home." So, there's another musician I could add to the list and thank her in a later video. In October 2019, my dad finally applied for a job after not working for almost a year. He was honest. He told them about the disease. They used him for a day, and they never called him back. That's when he started smacking himself in the head, when he woke up in the morning. This went on for a few months, especially after the pandemic started. But then Laurie Berkner started going live on Facebook, and somehow that helped him. He was able to visit family in the summer, which was good. He needed a break. But then the divorce came in October, shortly after I started watching the show 13 Reasons Why. I tried watching it in 2018 before my father's own suicide attempt, but couldn't understand it too well. The show helped a lot, even though I was never afraid to ask for help when it came to my mental health. I didn't talk about it much until I watched that show. Not with friends, at least. My mom had told me about the divorce on a Tuesday night. And yes, just to be clear, they are still living together so she can take care of him. But every morning after she told me about it, I was awake. Very early. I was always asking my mom or dad if he was hitting himself on the head again. The answer was always no. That was when I knew something wasn't right with me anymore, or at least at that time. I'd hear a car door first thing in the morning, and I'd start shaking because I thought it was him hitting himself. Thankfully, my creativity is what saved me. Making videos and writing music or stories helped a lot. But in February, he started hitting himself again. It got pretty bad, and just last month, I had to stay at my grandparents' for a week because I just couldn't take it anymore. He'd wake up, hit himself, take his pills, eat, hit himself, and then debate whether he wanted to go back to bed or watch TV with me. But unless he was laying down, he'd smack himself on the head He didn't want to, it just happened. I even tried having him watch Lori, but it didn't help this time. He could only watch one song, one of his favorites, I Know a Chicken. I knew it was bad when he couldn't even pay attention to Lori anymore. Something that he usually watched anytime, no matter what. He started taking medication to control the disease, but he'd still do it. Then he'd be tired in the afternoon, and I'd distract him by playing a game called Dice World on my phone with him. Now, he's not hitting himself because he's on a medication for anxiety as well. But the medicine is robbing him of a life. He's always tired, he can't even form a complete sentence. And he's basically talking like he's a zombie. Although I have to say, in the last couple of days, it's not as bad, but he still has the disease and anxiety and things like that. And he's still tired. My friend told me that this is happening because they don't want the dementia to take over. When he was home alone with me, he'd get out of bed and I'd ask him what he was doing. He'd always say he didn't know. That explains why they wanted him to sleep so much. I know that eventually he'll have to be put in a nursing home. We never really hear from my father's family. His friends call to check on him, but that's about it. Sometimes I'll get a comment on Facebook saying, "Tell Dad to call us," or "How's Dad doing?" But they don't call him. Not even for Father's Day. I'm staying at my grandparents' as I record this video. The reason? My dad's hallucinating again. In the summer of 2018, he thought he had all kinds of crazy injuries. One of which was that his finger was dark, whatever that means. On Wednesday night, he thought he had a cut on his head, but there was nothing. My sleeping habits are a mess. I usually stay awake until 1 or sometimes 2 a.m. just so I can sleep through the night without waking up to whatever my father's doing. Even on the days when I volunteer at a summer camp and I have to wake up at 7 in the morning, I stay awake, and I'm gonna end up being sleep deprived just making sure my parents aren't sleep deprived. Even going so far as to check and make sure that they're both sleeping, especially my dad. And if I hear a sound outside, I still go out there to check, because I never know what he's doing. Hey, I can't see, right? I'm sorry this video is so long, but I wanted to raise some kind of awareness about Huntington's disease. Not many people talk about it because it's such a monster. So, I figured I'd share my own experience. The worst part is watching him decline. He used to help me run the bases in T-ball. He used to go to daddy-daughter dances with me. And even though it was for a short amount of time this year, he used to play Dice World and other video games with me. Now he can't even really talk. He doesn't know the difference between the truth and a lie. Denies a lot of what he does. He couldn't even really do much for Father's Day this year. I ask you all to please share this video as much as possible. Because, Huntington's disease, it's nothing to screw with. And now you know why. Thanks for listening. Oh, and just so we're clear, I'm not mad at him for what he did in 2018. It wasn't his fault. The doctors scared him. Even though they knew that there was something wrong in his mind. And they, even had that psychologist in there to talk with him, they still scared him into almost committing suicide. There is no cure for this disease. I don't know if there ever will be, but thanks to you guys and the summer camp that I'm volunteering at, I have some sanity. And thanks again, Resheads, for everything.